Alex Miller, I'm Tony Whitmont. Welcome to BookTopia Buzz, and congratulations on Lovesong. This is the most beautiful, elegantly written book, I think, novel, and it's both intellectually and emotionally very satisfying. Can I start by asking you, what was it that inspired you to write this particular story?
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for interviewing me for your wonderful BookTopia, which I've looked at. It's a fantastic site. I didn't know it existed before. I had finished writing my previous novel, Landscape of Farewell, and it was a fairly difficult novel to write because I had to step through some very delicate territory. I wanted to break from the response. I mean, I write books for all sorts of reasons. Each book has its own reasons. And the book before, Landscape of Farewell, as well as the first one of those Stone Country books with Journey to the Stone Country, a lot of responsibility in writing a book like that. Huge sense of responsibility to your friends, to the people involved in the story, the people on whom you've based your characters, because they're based on living people, they're based on friends of mine who fortunately love the books, who celebrate them. And
also the responsibility, if I can interrupt you, of the issues that you're dealing with,
Absolutely.
very sensitive issues,
Yeah.
whereas Lovesong, well, I don't think of it as a simple story, in fact, but it is a very personal and intimate story.
yes, yeah, for sure. Kate was right. My daughter was right.
One thing that strikes me, or has struck me when I've read your books in the past, particularly Landscape of Farewell and Journey to the Stone Country, I know that you weren't born in Australia, although you are no doubt Australian now and identify yourself as Australian, but it seems to me that you really have the voice of the eastern half of Australia. There's no one that can talk Australia and describe it like you do, in a way that I think that Tim Winton does with Western Australia. So it would be interesting perhaps if you could tell me a little bit about your early experiences in Australia and how you came to write those books, and also then why now are we talking about Paris and Tunisia?
Absolutely, yeah. Growing up in England, I was well aware of the fact that I didn't really belong there. I was one of that great crowd of Londoners who were from the inner colonies, the colonies of Ireland and Scotland, which sent their poor to London, who then did the menial jobs, which is what we did. And so you were aware of not really belonging and of not really being part of the culture and the community. And when I came to Australia, the Irish and the Scots, my mother's and father's people, had very kindly settled here a few generations ahead of me and built this lovely egalitarian society, the famous Australian egalitarian society. I didn't really know it was waiting for me, so I felt as though I'd found my way home.
That experience, though, of being there and being on the land really comes through in your writing in those previous books. And I'm wondering how in Lovesong, I mean, it seems to me, not that I've been to Tunisia, but there's this authenticity with which you speak, particularly when you talk about secret women's business. You know, it's all the women there, the women in the book.
The Berber women in particular, I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes, it all seems to be sort of spices, song and sex, as far as I can see.
A lot of hard work.
Yes. But it rings very authentically true, as does, you know, Vaugiraud, that little part of Paris before it became gentrified, as does the parts of the book that are set in Melbourne.
Yeah. Well, I guess all those things come from the landscape of my memory. I've been to Tunisia, I've had some very intense experiences there. I know people there, have friends there. And Paris, I lived in Paris for a while in the 70s. As a foreigner, as a stranger, my friends were Polish and Tunisian and North African, and people were, you know, I wasn't friends particularly with French people because it was hard to get to know French people, so you knew the immigrant population, you became part of that. You went at night to certain telephones where you could make free calls. You know about them?
I certainly do. I have my own experiences of that.
And you've got to be careful not to get picked up by the cops,
yes,
because they'll trap you there. They know about them too, of course. So all that sort of thing, that was my Paris experience. And Vaugiraud in those days was where the abattoirs were. Now the big bookstore, of course, is there.
Yes.
So these things, inevitably, beginning this love story that I wanted to write, because I thought, where did this guy come from when he comes down the road? Where has he been? He's been away from his home at Araluen, the farm, all these years. And I wondered, where's he been? I thought, okay, so he's been in Paris. That's where he's been. He's been overseas. I didn't want him to have been in London. And I thought, better, he's been in Paris. He's been part of the migrant population in Paris, an Australian who is part of the migrant population in Paris. So it's kind of reverse experience. And it was natural, part of the memory, the landscape of my memory and imagination is Paris and Tunisia.
Yes.
So putting them over there, it had a very strong, I saw Houria and Dom Pacos, you know. I knew the guy. It was horrible that he didn't last very long. I would love to have had a whole book about him. But what can you do? The book leads you on and you have to do that book, not some other book, you know.
Well, it leads you on, in this case, to Sabiha, I don't know how you pronounce her name, and of course to Bruno. And the marvellous thing about your writing, I think, is that it all unfolds at such, I won't say a slow pace, but a measured pace that I found myself, I was in the room watching Bruno shuffle around in his seat when he was really uncomfortable, when he was having that first interaction. Being seduced. Well, okay. Yeah.
Poor bastard.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. His fall.
Oh my God, yeah. What could he do? I felt sorry for him.
Yes. So you must have had enormous sympathy then for Ken, who's the narrator, who's the writer, who's struggling with writing and trying to find a story that's captures him, and then it becomes elusive, and then in the end it's actually taken from him.
Oh, you think it's taken from him?
Well, it's ambiguous. I'm not sure.
We can leave that to the reader.
We can.
Yeah. Well, yes, I mean, Ken is a joke. He's me. I really like the framing of that because he's seduced by the story. And in a way, he's also seduced by Sabiha, in a much subtler way, because it takes the whole book from the beginning of the book, where he sees what he calls an antique sorrow in her eyes, and that is what inspires him to write his book or to go in search of his story. He sees this beautiful exotic woman and thinks she's married to this Aussie bloke who seems pretty ordinary. And what is it in their lives? What is it in her life that has produced this antique sorrow, this hidden sort of sorrow? But he picks it up, he's observant. And he's hooked on getting this story then. Yeah, so he thinks he's escaping from writing, but he's being trapped by it too, drawn in and held by the story to the end. And at the very end, I think, my feeling is, when Sabiha says she's going to do the cooking, he's invited them to dinner. And she says, I'm cooking, by the way, on Wednesday. He says, you can't cook. You're my guest. You don't cook. She says, we cook for our friends. We know what we're doing. You provide the house, we'll cook. She says, you're part of the story now. Words something like that. She says, you're part of our story now, or part of the story now. And that seems to me, without crossing my T's and dotting my I's, it seems to me that she's giving him her blessing. The book's about infidelity on a grand scale. It's not about having an ordinary affair. It's about extraordinary infidelity.
Absolutely extraordinary, and
because the infidelity entails a profound fidelity.
Yes, because
to something grander.
Yes, exactly, for this idea, and that the whole thing is premeditated and perhaps even foreseen by the grandmother or what have you. I mean, yes. Could I just ask you one final question, and that's really about your process of writing and how it is for you when you finish a book like this.
Oh, you miss it. You've got to go through a little period of mourning and of doubt, of course. You think, what have I done? Have I done? And then I was fortunate, I guess, when I finished this book, I didn't have a long period of drought. I immediately had a very strong offer for another book, an idea.
Well, I won't ask you about that now, but I certainly look forward to reading it at some point in time.
Well, it'll be a few years away.
Yes, I'm sure.
There's no pressure.
That's right. But in the meantime, can I commend you and congratulate you again, and thank you very much for talking to BookTopia Buzz.
Thanks for talking with us, Tony. It's been a pleasure.